On the 28th of July, 1986, a 25-year-old estate agent called Suzy Lamplugh drove to a house on Fulham Road in London to meet a client who had booked an appointment under the name Mr. Kipper. She was never seen again. Her car was found that afternoon, unlocked, a quarter of a mile from the property. Her handbag was inside it. Her body has never been found. A man called John Cannon was later identified by police as the prime suspect. He had been released from prison the day before Suzy disappeared, was known to use the alias Mr. Kipper, and was subsequently convicted of a separate murder. He has never been charged with Suzy Lamplugh's disappearance. He has maintained his silence. The investigation has never been formally closed. It has simply stopped producing results. Suzy Lamplugh was declared dead in 1994. She has never been found. The man police believe killed her is in prison for something else. And the British justice system has not found a way to charge him for what most investigators believe he did on that Tuesday afternoon in Fulham. In this video, we are counting down 13 dark British cases that the police walked away from. Not cases without suspects, not cases without evidence. Cases where the investigation stalled, the file went cold, the family kept asking, and the answer never came. Stay with me to the end, because number one is a case that has been open for 60 years, where a family has never stopped searching, and where the person responsible died without saying a word. So hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's begin. On the 28th of July, 1986, Suzy Lamplugh, a 25-year-old estate agent working for Sturgis in Fulham, drove to 37 Shorrolds Road in Fulham to show a property to a client who had booked an appointment under the name Mr. Kipper. She was never seen again. Her white Ford Fiesta was found that afternoon parked at Stevenage Road, a quarter of a mile from the property, unlocked, with her handbag still inside. The appointment book showed the Mr. Kipper booking in her handwriting. Colleagues at the office recalled her mentioning the appointment. A witness later reported seeing a woman matching Suzy's description getting into a car with a man near the Shorrolds Road property around midday. No confirmed sighting has been established after that point. In 2002, a man called John Cannon, then serving a life sentence for the murder of Shirley Banks in Bristol in 1987, was named by police as their prime suspect in Suzy Lamplugh's disappearance. Cannon had been released from Wormwood Scrubs on the 25th of July, 1986, 3 days before Suzy disappeared. He was known to use the nickname Kipper. He matched the description of the man seen near the property. He was a convicted rapist with a documented pattern of targeting professional women. He has always denied any involvement. Suzy Lamplugh was declared legally dead in 1994. In 2018, police excavated a garden in Sutton Coldfield following information that her remains might be buried there. Nothing was found. In 2021, fresh searches were conducted in Worcestershire. Nothing was found. Suzy Lamplugh has never been found. John Cannon has never been charged. The investigation remains open in name. In practice, it has reached a wall that the evidence available has not been sufficient to break through. The Suzy Lamplugh Trust, established by Suzy's parents in the aftermath of her disappearance, has become one of the most significant personal safety charities in Britain. It is, in part, a monument to what happens when a family is left with no answer and builds something in the space where the answer should have been. On the night of the 10th of March, 1987, a private detective named Daniel Morgan was found dead in the car park of the Golden Lion pub in Sydenham, South London. He had been attacked with an axe. He had arranged to meet a contact that evening. He had told colleagues he was about to expose serious police corruption. The murder of Daniel Morgan has never been solved. In the 37 years since his death, 5 police investigations have been conducted. None has produced a conviction. A public inquiry, the Daniel Morgan Independent Panel, established in 2013 and reporting in 2021, concluded that the Metropolitan Police had been guilty of institutional corruption in the original investigation, that officers had compromised the integrity of the inquiry to protect corrupt colleagues, and that the Metropolitan Police's subsequent handling of the case, including its repeated resistance to the independent inquiry, amounted to institutional corruption. The panel found that evidence had been concealed, that witnesses had not been pursued, and that suspects with connections to corrupt officers had been protected. The panel did not name specific officers as corrupt because the evidence available after 37 years of institutional resistance did not reach the standard required for criminal attribution. Daniel Morgan's family have campaigned for the full truth for over 30 years. His brother, Alastair Morgan, has described the experience of pursuing justice through 5 failed police investigations as the defining experience of his adult life. No one has ever been charged with the murder of Daniel Morgan. The axe that killed him has never been found. The car park where he died is still there. On the 9th of October, 1986, 2 9-year-old girls, Karen Hadaway and Nicola Fellows, left their homes in the Molescombe estate in Brighton to play together. They were found murdered the following morning in Wild Park, a few hundred meters from their homes. They had been sexually assaulted. A man called Russell Bishop was arrested and tried for their murders in 1987. He was acquitted. He returned to the Molescombe estate, where the girls had lived and where their families continued to live. The families of Karen and Nicola spent the next 3 decades knowing that the man they believed had killed their daughters was living in the same community as them. In 2018, advances in DNA technology produced new forensic evidence linking Russell Bishop to the murders. He was retried and convicted in 2018, 32 years after the murders. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 36 years. The conviction came too late for some of the people who had spent 3 decades waiting for it. Karen's mother, Lee Hadaway, had campaigned relentlessly for the reopening of the case and did not live to see the conviction. She died in 2016, 2 years before the retrial. The case of Karen Hadaway and Nicola Fellows represents both the ultimate resolution of a long, cold case and a reminder that resolution delayed by 3 decades carries its own permanent cost. The children were 9 years old. Their families spent 32 years living in the knowledge that the man they believed responsible was free, in some periods living in the same community. Before the technology existed to prove what they had always known, on the 15th of July 1992, Rachel Nickell, a 23-year-old woman, was stabbed 49 times on Wimbledon Common while her 2-year-old son Alex watched. The Metropolitan Police identified a suspect, Colin Stagg, and mounted an undercover operation in which a female officer, known as Lizzie James, formed a relationship with Stagg over several months and attempted to elicit a confession. The Operation Edsel, produced no confession and no admission. The evidence gathered was not sufficient to convict. Colin Stagg was charged and tried in 1994. The judge halted the trial, describing the undercover operation as an affront to justice. Colin Stagg was acquitted. In 2008, a man called Robert Napper, who had already been convicted of another murder, pleaded guilty to the manslaughter of Rachel Nickell on the grounds of diminished responsibility. DNA evidence had linked Napper to the scene. Robert Napper had been in contact with the Metropolitan Police in the years before Rachel Nickell's murder. He had come to police attention multiple times. He had not been identified as a serious risk. Colin Stagg spent 14 years as the public suspect in a murder he did not commit. He received compensation from the Metropolitan Police. The investigation that failed to identify Robert Napper, while subjecting an innocent man to an undercover operation that a judge described as an affront to justice, has never produced criminal accountability for the investigators who designed and authorized it. In the autumn of 2006, 5 women were murdered in and around Ipswich over a period of 6 weeks. All 5 were sex workers. All 5 were found in rural locations outside the town. All 5 had been strangled. The murders caused national alarm and produced the largest murder investigation in Suffolk police history. In December 2006, a man called Steve Wright was arrested. He was convicted in 2008 of all 5 murders and sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life tariff. The case appears on the surface to have been resolved. Steve Wright is in prison. He has been convicted. But the families of the 5 women and researchers who have examined the case in detail have raised questions that the investigation and the conviction have not answered. Most significantly were there other perpetrators. The pattern of the killings, the tight geographical clustering in the early weeks, followed by a change in method and location, has led some investigators and criminologists to suggest that Wright may not have been responsible for all 5 murders, or that others may have been involved in some of them. Wright himself has never commented publicly on the case. The families of some of the victims have expressed dissatisfaction with the extent to which questions about the full picture have been investigated. The women who were killed, Gemma Adams, Tanya Nickell, Annalie Alderton, Paula Clennell, and Annette Nichols, were sex workers in a town that had not sufficiently prioritized their safety before they were killed. The question of whether everything that can be known about their murders has been established is one that the conviction of Steve Wright has not fully answered. On the 26th of April 1999, Jill Dando, the BBC television presenter and Crime Watch host, was shot dead on the doorstep of her home in Fulham. The murder was carried out with a single shot from a handgun. No one in the street heard the shot. No one was seen leaving the scene. Barry George, a man with a history of obsessive behavior towards celebrities, was convicted of the murder in 2001. He was acquitted on retrial in 2008, having spent 8 years in prison. A tiny particle of gun discharge residue found in his coat pocket, the central forensic evidence of the original prosecution, was subsequently judged insufficient to sustain a conviction. Barry George was released. He was later awarded compensation. No one else has been charged with Jill Dando's murder. The Metropolitan Police has explored multiple alternative theories across the years since Barry George's acquittal, including the possibility that the murder was connected to Jill Dando's Crime Watch work, or to coverage of the Kosovo conflict that was running at the time of her death, or to a stalker who was never identified. None of these lines of inquiry has produced a charge. The investigation remains open. The doorstep where Jill Dando was killed is on an ordinary Fulham street. The murder has never been solved. A woman was shot dead outside her own front door in one of the most densely populated cities in the world, and the British justice system has been unable to determine who did it. On the 3rd of May 2007, 3-year-old Madeleine McCann disappeared from apartment 5A of the Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz in Portugal's Algarve. She had been left sleeping with her younger twin siblings while her parents, Kate and Jerry McCann, dined at a nearby tapas restaurant with friends. Checking on the children at intervals, she was never seen again. The case became the most intensively covered missing child case in British media history and one of the most expensive investigations ever conducted. The Portuguese and British police investigations, which at various points treated Madeleine's parents as suspects before clearing them, have not produced a charge in 17 years. A German suspect, Christian Bruckner, was identified in 2020. German prosecutors have described him as a suspect in Madeleine's disappearance and possible murder, and he is serving a prison sentence in Germany for an unrelated rape in Portugal. As of the time of this video's production, no charge relating to Madeleine McCann has been brought against Bruckner or anyone else. The Metropolitan Police Operation, Operation Grange, which began in 2011 and has cost over £13 million, has produced no charge. Madeleine McCann was 3 years old. She would be 20 years old now. She has never been found. The apartment she disappeared from is still there. Between February 1964 and February 1965, 6 women were murdered in West London. All 6 were sex workers. All 6 were found nude. All 6 had been strangled. The investigation, the largest mounted by the Metropolitan Police to that point, failed to charge anyone. The killer became known in the press as Jack the Stripper. Over 20 years, various suspects were investigated. One significant theory pointed to a man who committed suicide in 1965, whose death coincided with the murders stopping. The Metropolitan Police never publicly confirmed or denied this attribution. In 2000, a book by journalist and former policeman Neil Milkins proposed a specific suspect. The case was reviewed and the suspect was examined. No charge was brought. The Hammersmith Nude Murders remain the largest unsolved serial murder case in London's history. The women who were killed, Hannah Tailford, Irene Lockwood, Helen Barthélemy, Mary Fleming, Frances Brown, and Bridget O'Hara, were sex workers in a city that did not prioritize their safety and did not prioritize their justice after their deaths. The case has never been formally closed. The killer, or killers, were never charged. 60 years after the last murder, the full truth about who killed 6 women in West London across 12 months has never been established. This case appears earlier in this channel's history, in the video about British institutions that got away with it. But the murder of Stephen Lawrence belongs in this video too, for a different reason. In January 2012, Gary Dobson and David Norris were convicted of Stephen Lawrence's murder, 19 years after the night in April 1993, when he was killed at a bus stop in Eltham. But there were 5 suspects identified in the original investigation. Dobson and Norris are in prison. 3 other men, who were among the original suspects named immediately after the murder, have never been convicted. They have never been acquitted. There has been no finding of innocence. There has simply been a failure to produce evidence sufficient to charge them. The advances in forensic technology that eventually convicted Dobson and Norris have been applied to the remaining suspects. The results have not produced charges. The men who were named as suspects in 1993 are living their lives. Stephen Lawrence's mother, Baroness Doreen Lawrence, has spent 30 years pursuing justice for her son. 2 of the 5 original suspects have been convicted. The other 3 remain uncharged. The case is technically open. The remaining suspects have not been publicly named in recent years in the context of ongoing investigation. The question of whether the full truth about who was on that street corner in Eltham on the 22nd of April 1993 will ever be legally established is one that 30 years of investigation has not answered. In November 1983, a 15-year-old girl called Linda Mann was raped and murdered in the village of Narborough in Leicestershire. Her killer was not caught. In July 1986, a second 15-year-old girl, Dawn Ashworth, was raped and murdered in the same area. The connection between the 2 murders was established by forensic analysis. A local man, Richard Buckland, confessed to the second murder. He denied the first. In what became a landmark moment in forensic science, Professor Alec Jeffreys of Leicester University used DNA profiling for the first time in a criminal investigation to test Buckland's DNA against the samples from both crime scenes. The DNA did not match. Buckland, who had confessed, was innocent. A mass screening of local men followed. The actual killer, Colin Pitchfork, attempted to have a colleague take the test for him. The colleague reported this. Pitchfork was arrested and became the first person to be convicted of murder using DNA evidence. This case is included in this video not because it was unsolved, but because of what came before the solution. Richard Buckland confessed to a murder he did not commit. He would have been convicted without the DNA test. The mechanisms by which false confessions are produced, by which innocent people are prosecuted because they confess under pressure, and by which the British justice system has repeatedly relied on confessions as primary evidence rather than subjecting them to the scrutiny they require, are not unique to the Buckland case. They define a pattern. On the 26th of October, 1992, a 7-year-old girl called Nikki Allan was found murdered in a derelict building in Sunderland. She had been stabbed 37 times. A man called George Heron was charged with her murder. He was acquitted at trial in 1993. In 2021, almost 30 years after the original acquittal, George Heron was charged again with Nikki Allan's murder, following new forensic evidence. He was convicted in June 2022 and sentenced to a minimum of 22 years. The case of Nikki Allan represents the longest gap between a murder and a conviction in British legal history. Nikki's mother, Sharon Henderson, spent almost 30 years campaigning for justice for her daughter. She attended the 2022 trial and heard the conviction. She also heard, for the first time in 30 years, a jury say that the man she had always believed killed her daughter was guilty. The case raises, as other cases on this list raise, the question of what was known after the 1993 acquittal that was not sufficient to bring a new charge, and whether everything that could have been done to investigate the forensic evidence sooner was done. Nikki was 7 years old. Her killer walked free for almost 30 years. Her mother spent those 30 years knowing what she believed had happened and being unable to prove it in court. The conviction in 2022 is justice. The 30 years between the acquittal and the conviction is also something, and its name is not justice. On the 16th of June, 1964, a 12-year-old boy called Keith Bennett left his home in Longsight, Manchester, to walk to his grandmother's house. He was abducted by Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. He was murdered. His body was buried on Saddleworth Moor. He has never been found. Brady and Hindley were convicted of the Moor's murders in 1966. They confessed to Keith's murder in 1987, 23 years after they killed him. Brady claimed across decades of correspondence with Keith's mother, Winnie Johnson, and with journalists and detectives to know the precise location of the grave on Saddleworth Moor. He provided maps. He led police to the moor on multiple occasions. The searches, using cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar, excavation, and every available forensic technique, did not find Keith. Winnie Johnson campaigned every day for 33 years to bring her son home. She died in 2012 without knowing where her child was buried. Brady died in 2017 without telling anyone. The location of Keith Bennett's grave is, in the view of the investigators who have spent the most time on this case, known to no living person. Saddleworth Moor is visible from the motorway. You can drive across it on the A635. Keith Bennett is 12 years old on every document that bears his name. He has been 12 years old for over 60 years. Somewhere under that moorland, he is still there, waiting to be found by someone who no longer exists. The police did not walk away from Keith Bennett. They never stopped looking. But looking and finding are different things. And the Moor has kept its secret for 60 years, through every search, through every new technique, through every map that Brady provided, and every location that Brady indicated, and every excavation that Brady's information made possible. The Moor does not give up what it holds. And the British justice system, which convicted the people who put Keith there, has never been able to bring him home.